Today we look at the best and worst player to ever win each ring amount, so we can see who the best of the best was and who was the worst of the worst. And I'll mention, for the most part, we're not including any players from the 50s and 60s except the Wilt Chamberlains and Bill Russells, just so we don't wind up with a list full of a bunch of guys that we've never heard of. Okay, with that said, let's go. Starting first with 0 rings, well, the best ringless player of all time would probably have to be Karl Malone. Now, guys like Chris Paul and James Harden first came to mind, but I had to rank Karl slightly higher. He was a 2-time MVP, made the finals twice, and is a top 2 power forward in the history of the game. The way he scored 25 plus points for 15 years, as well as made all defensive first teams along the way, show how good he was on both ends. Of course, he would probably have a couple rings if it wasn't thanks to playing in the Michael Jordan era, and sadly for Karl, he only played for one other season outside of Utah, and that was the 2003 and 4 Lakers. But they'd get destroyed by the Pistons 4-1. Not even playing on a super team after Jordan retired made him lucky enough to win a ring. Now, the worst player to ever win a ring or be lucky enough to wind up on the end of the bench on any championship squad would have to be Anthony Bennett. Now, I understand he's not the worst NBA player technically. There's several guys out there that have probably only played a couple of games in the league, probably never scored, and you could consider them the worst. But just for Bennett's story and how bad he was after going first overall, a lot of people, myself included, just like to refer to him as the worst player of all time. Moving on to 1 ring, some of the top guys to ever only win a single ring are guys like Jason Kidd, Dirk, and Kevin Garnett. But overall, I'd say the best is easily Giannis. And of course, this is only going to be accurate for a limited time, because there's a good chance he wins another one before it's all said and done, especially with the Bucks about to be at 100% again this year. I mean, there are a lot of people's favorites to win it all in 2023, but we'll see. And for Giannis, he's a guy that always is an MVP and Defensive Player of the Year talks, so he was an easy pick for the best with 1 ring. The worst NBA player of all time with just a single championship was former NBA player Sun Yu. On paper, his career makes you question how he even made the NBA, but when you realize he was a 6'9" shooting guard that was a pretty good passer, it makes sense why a team would want to take a chance on him. It just didn't pay off. Sun was a part of the 2008-9 Lakers, but he only played 10 games and averaged 0.6 points and 0.2 assists in 2.8 minutes a night before he was sent to the G League, where he really stepped it up to averaging 0.8 points a game. And for some reason, the Lakers reclaimed him to their NBA roster just in time for the playoffs, where he never played a single minute. But since he was a part of their team, he got a ring and is considered an NBA champion. Now we're looking at the best players of all time to win just 2 NBA championships. And you know, this is a level where stars prove that it wasn't just a fluke that they won a title and that they're the real deal. Some of the top guys include Kawhi Leonard, Ray Allen, Kevin Durant, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Isaiah Thomas. And guys like Hakeem and KD came close to taking this spot due to the fact that they're always right outside almost everyone's top 10 players of all time. But Wilt Chamberlain also has 2 rings in the NBA, and he's 95% of the time inside people's top 10s, and for good reason. I mean, it's still weird that Wilt was so dominant like he was, but only won 2 championships. Sure, he played in the Bill Russell era, but he went 2-4 all time in the finals and only played against Bill twice, so it wasn't even that. Either way though, Chamberlain was without a doubt the best with 2 rings. On the other hand, the all-time worst is easily Adam Morrison, but the dude's a living legend. He was drafted 3rd overall, only played 3 seasons in the NBA, but won a title in 2 of them. But the bad part about it is, well, he played for the 08 and 09 Lakers, but barely ever touched the floor in each of those entire 2 seasons, and only played at all in 2 playoff games throughout both of LA's 2 championships. For a player whose career turned out so poorly, he really did get kinda lucky. When we move over to 3 rings, honestly, not a ton of big names come up. Only Dwayne Wade, Larry Bird, and James Worthy as the notable stars. Obviously with Larry Bird being the best. But it's just weird to find out that most guys that won 3 titles were either just bench guys that didn't do much or role players for these dynasty teams like the Warriors or the Bulls. But Larry Bird was the guy that led his Celtics all the way through their 3 titles and fought hard to get past Magic Johnson and Kareem. Boston even made the finals 4 straight years at one point, playing the Lakers in 3 of them and winning 2. So Bird finished his career off with a 3-2 finals record, which really isn't all that bad. And Bird was one of those guys that really made the difference on his team, leading them to 60 wins in his rookie season and winning a title in his 2nd. As for the worst player with 3 championships, like I mentioned, we have a lot of bench and role players to choose from here, but I'd say the worst of the worst is probably Patrick McCaw. And at first, he was pretty lucky getting picked up by the Warriors in the draft in 2016, which meant that he won a championship in each of his first 2 seasons. But then he declined to return to the team, joined the Cavs, got waived, then joined the Toronto Raptors in 2019 halfway through the year, who of course then won the title that season. So the man was 3 for 3 on NBA championships, winning 3 in a row, becoming only the 7th player to ever do so. The best to ever do it with 4 rings is without a doubt LeBron James, and this is the tier with the true champions of the game. Guys that are or were a part of some all-time great teams. Guys that cracked the code of what it takes to be a real champ, which is why Steph Curry, Shaq, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Robert Parrish, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili all have 4 rings. But again, LeBron's the best from this amount, even though he's got a pretty sad 4-6 finals record. The 10 finals are great, but more losses than wins isn't good. While the worst from 4 championships is without a doubt Will Perdue. He was drafted by the Bulls and played as backup center during Jordan's first three-peat. Well, then he was traded to the Spurs for Dennis Rodman, and he was now David Robinson's backup when the Spurs won the title 4 years later, which won him his 4th ring. And that's pretty good for a player that mainly only came off the bench. He just ended up in the right place at the right time. Now at 5 rings, the list of players are just getting smaller and smaller as the ring amounts go up. And with this amount, you just gotta be extremely lucky or extremely good. And of course, Magic Johnson was extremely good, which is how he won 5 NBA titles. But he also had a little bit of luck on his side too, with him getting to play with Kareem for all 5 of them. Other guys with 5 rings include Kobe Bryant, Dennis Rodman, and Tim Duncan. As for Magic though, he dominated his era like very few others, making the NBA Finals 9 times in his 12-year career. To make the finals in 75% of your seasons that you played is something we've only ever seen done by Bill Russell, and it's why without a doubt Magic's the best with 5 championships. While the worst is Steve Kerr, and Steve wasn't a bad player at all. He was just the worst that we had to choose from, and he got lucky. He got on the Bulls just in time for their second three-peat, which he was a pretty good contributing factor to. MJ retires and he gets moved to the Spurs, who instantly won the title the next season, now giving him 4 in a row. Well, 3 years later the team trades him to the Blazers. He plays there for 1 year before they trade him back to San Antonio in 2003, who goes on to win the title that year too, which now gives him 5. And it doesn't count for the video, but now after winning 4 more with the Warriors as their head coach, he's got 9 rings and just needs 1 more to fit on every single finger. For 6 NBA championships won, the spot for the best player of course goes to Michael Jordan. And of course I think it could have been 8 if not for his first retirement, and could have been 9 or 10 if not for retiring early the second time. But then again, who knows if his body would have been able to hold on for that long with that schedule, but it's fun to think about. While the worst is Scottie Pippen, since the only other options were him or Kareem, since we're not including 50s players. So yeah, obviously Scottie took it. Now surprisingly, there's still a few players with 7 NBA championships, and even more surprisingly, none of them were stars. And I say we're not doing 50s and 60s players, right, as I have no choice but to start including them because with this amount of rings, the selection gets so limited. The 3 are Robert Horry, Jim Loscutoff, and Frank Ramsey. So I'd say the best from this one is Robert Horry, and the worst is probably Jim something. While at 8 rings, we're now getting to all the dudes that played as part of the Bill Russell teams and just got lucky enough to be his teammates for so long. So the best from 8 rings is John Havlicek, and the worst was a dude named Satch Sanders. And then for 10 and 11 rings, only 1 player has that amount for each, in Sam Jones and Bill Russell. So oddly enough, they take the spot for the best and worst from those ring amounts. Hopefully this gave you a little bit of insight into the true luck and true skill that really goes into NBA championships and championship teams. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.